One morning, the noisy and crowded streets of New York woke up to something different. Every street corner, every building, was filled with people marching in protest against black discrimination. The streets were alive with slogans and cries for justice. Everyone was holding up banners and shouting together. Today was the day to make their voices heard. New York had become a place where everyone was fighting for equal rights. Among the crowd was 28-year-old Jessie, a young black woman who had faced years of discrimination and oppression. Today, she was ready to raise her voice. Today, the fight for equality was not just for her, but for. As the crowd grew, so did the police presence. Officers surrounded the area, holding their shields and attempting to intimidate the protesters. Jessie took a deep breath. Everything around her was changing. People were supporting each other, giving strength to one another. Together, they had become stronger in their collective cry. There was a mix of anger and hope in the air. "We just want the equality we deserve," Jessie and her friends shouted as they joined the growing crowd. The chants grew louder. "We want justice! Hear our voice!" Jessie's inner anger grew as she yearned for the oppression and injustice she had experienced for so long to come to an end. But the police couldn't tolerate the crowd growing. Within minutes, officers began advancing with shields and batons, pushing the crowd back. Jessie took another step forward, joining in with the movement. Another step, and then another. She knew she couldn't stop now. With every step, she wasn't just moving for herself, but for everyone who had been silenced and pushed aside for so long. Suddenly, one of the officers stepped forward and aggressively targeted Jessie. With one swift motion, the baton struck her leg. Jessie was thrown off balance, the blow to her leg jolting through her body. Her knee buckled and she nearly collapsed to the ground. She gasped in pain, but she couldn't allow herself to stay down. Despite the sharp pain, she quickly composed herself and stood up. She wouldn't stop. She had carried this injustice, not only in her body, but in her soul, for far too long. Every protester, every individual, every black person needed to raise their voice. Jessie continued despite the pain, feeling her leg throb with each step. The pain intensified with each stride, but there was no stopping now. She walked forward with determination, thinking to herself, "We must do this, not just for us, but for everyone who has been wronged." As time passed, the pain in Jessie's leg became unbearable. Each step grew harder, and the sharp pain continued to grow. Tears began to fall from her eyes, the physical pain echoing the years of injustice she had suffered. The pain was so intense, she could barely stand. Slowly, she sank to her knees, clutching her leg. At that moment, people in the crowd noticed Jessie's condition. "Jessie, take a break," they urged her. But Jessie, gritting her teeth, replied, "No, I can't stop. I have to do this." However, after a while, the pain became too much. Jessie could no longer walk. Her body refused to carry her any further. The crowd watched in horror as Jessie collapsed. "Jessie!" they shouted, trying to revive her, but the pain was too much for her to handle. Jessie passed out on the street. Panic spread through the crowd as they quickly called for an ambulance. Emergency medical teams arrived and carefully lifted Jessie, preparing to rush her to the hospital. The crowd fell silent as they watched Jessie being carried away. Though the protest was coming to an end, the impact of Jessie's resistance left a deep mark on everyone present. When Jessie arrived at the hospital, the doctors confirmed that the blow to her leg had caused serious damage. They said there were significant muscle tears and that her recovery would take time. But despite all the pain, Jessie remained determined to continue fighting for justice. During her recovery, friends came to visit her and shared their decision to continue the protest. They promised to honor Jessie's struggle and keep gathering stronger at every opportunity. Jessie's fall wasn't a defeat. It had become a symbol of greater resistance. The protests would continue, and the crowd would not back down. While Jessie was recovering in the hospital, the protests in New York grew even larger. Jessie's pain echoed through the streets with each step taken by the protesters. They were fighting not just against black discrimination, but also against police brutality. Jessie's collapse had ignited a spark of courage in everyone. The protests continued to grow despite the police crackdown. Jessie's struggle was not just for her, but for everyone who had been wronged. That moment showed that a greater resistance was needed to turn Jessie's dream into a reality, and Jessie's pain would mark the beginning of real change in society.